What's good, guys? Fancy Joe back here to talk the Deshaun Watson saga. We finally got word that it's going to be a 6-game suspension. I'm going to break down all the fantasy football implications for that. If you guys want the most recent fantasy football news, rankings, wide receiver rankings drop later today. Mock draft probably already out by now. If not, drops at 8 a.m., so check that out. But yeah, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and let me know where you're taking currently Cleveland Browns in the drafts. So Deshaun Watson got 6-game suspension, and I'm going to talk about what this means for all of the big pieces in Cleveland for fantasy football. Honestly, I feel like this is pretty on par with what people have been expecting recently, somewhere in that like 6 to 10 game range. I guess this is on the lower end of anything that could have been expected, although recently some people were rumoring that he might not be suspended at all this season. They're talking about time served as last year. Regardless of that situation and what you think about it, I'm really just here to talk fantasy football. Okay, so let's talk the ADP. The first guy I thought of, because I still think Deshaun Watson should be drafted outside a top 10 quarterback. To me, with that 6-game suspension, quarterback position is just so replaceable. I do think he'll be very productive for fantasy football, but he's not going to a situation that just has bountiful wide receivers, although he's shown in the past he's a good enough quarterback to produce regardless of the situation around him. Obviously, he was a dominant fantasy football quarterback in Houston. But I think this is a major boost for Nick Chubb. Right now, they have him as the 8th-ranked running back on ADP, according to fantasy football. According to Fantasy Pros, that's too high for me. I would still take guys like DeAndre Swift ahead of him, Aaron Jones ahead of him, Saquon Barkley ahead of him, Fournette ahead of him. But then I think it is Nick Chubb to me. I still view him as a borderline RB1 right in that range. I think he'll probably finish as an RB1 with the guys that get injured and things like that. I think one of the biggest boosts, though, this gives to is Kareem Hunt, currently drafted as RB at 30, behind Devin Singletary, behind Miles Sanders, who now might be the second running back in Philly. That's a situation to monitor. Guys like Clyde as well. I'm probably going to take Kareem Hunt ahead of most of these guys just because he's been so productive as their RB2 for fantasy. On a per-game basis, has always scored a good amount of points, honestly. So I think he's a big winner. I think maybe the biggest winner in this whole thing, though, is probably Amari Cooper. He's kind of getting bodied in drafts. Actually, wide receiver 20 overall. I expected all these guys to be going a little bit lower than where they actually were, to be honest with you. I thought he was at wide receiver 24 range. Please tell me this is half-point PPR. Yeah. Okay, Marty Cooper. I think he gets a major bump. Again, though, it's a 6-game sample size where you're going to get him with Jacoby Brissett to start the season with those pivotal games for fantasy matchups. Where am I taking him? I'm taking him out of Chris Godwin, that's for sure. I'm not taking him out of Marquise Brown, though, personally. I'm not taking him ahead of Brandon Cooks. I'm not taking him ahead of Jerry Jeudy. I'm taking him ahead of Michael Thomas. I'm not taking him ahead of Cortland Sutton. I'll take him ahead of Amon-Ra. I'd take him ahead of Allen Robinson. That one's close, though. I think I would take him ahead of all these guys, except for the few guys I named. I'd take him ahead of Terry, though, definitely. So I think he should slide it right in. I think he's a back-end wide receiver 2 to me with the recent news. It's just you had to weather a storm with all these guys before they get back, and that's the biggest concern to me is just that situation. I think David Njoku is probably one of the biggest values now just because of the target situation currently there in Cleveland. They don't have a ton of options. So if you think Njoku all of a sudden is going to get top targets from a big-time quarterback in Deshaun Watson, and he could be, I'm less worried about him with Jacoby Brissett just because there's less pass volume in general. The bar is so much lower for that tight end position in fantasy football. He just got a nice contract. We saw Deshaun Watson throw the ball to Darren Fells when he was in Houston, who is much less talented. So maybe this is the year that David Njoku is used more, and he's got the opportunity to certainly produce for fantasy. So I think he becomes an interesting tight end late guy. He's probably the most interesting name in this whole thing to me for fantasy football. And then Deshaun Watson, I'm taking, like I said, I'm still taking, there's 10 quarterbacks easily ahead of him. I'm taking all these guys right here. Russ on up, I'm taking ahead of Deshaun Watson. Now, I would take Trey Lance ahead of him as well just because I think the upside for Trey Lance is so crazy because of that rushing upside. All the rest of these guys, though, I'd probably take him ahead of Aaron Rodgers. I'd probably take Stafford ahead of him, although that one's really close. But the rest of these guys I would take, you could easily grab Kirk Cousins at the end of your draft and pair Kirk Cousins and Deshaun Watson together. I think you'll get a solid 6 games out of Kirk Cousins. I think he'll be a borderline QB1 on his own, and then you get all that upside of Deshaun Watson post Week 6. Really another thing you gotta always check out with these type of situations. I butchered the spelling. When is the Cleveland Browns bye? That is gonna be. They have a bye week in 9. That's what it looks like to me right now. Okay, so that's something to consider. He'll miss the first 6 weeks. He'll play week 7, play week 8, and then he'll miss week 9. Not the worst case situation though. There. Okay, if you guys have made it to this video, thank you guys for watching. This has been Fantasy Joe. Please hit that subscribe button. Like I said, wide receiver rankings dropping later today. You'll want to check those out. Running back rankings dropping tomorrow. League winners later this week, so check out all that good content coming your guys' way. Thank you guys for watching.